Gee, Pierce, Emma, JB. I'm tired of living in this geriatric, cowardly planet. I wish I could have something else. And then you guys go,
A Brave New
how about you
World?
try Brave New World? Yeah,
Oh.
thanks, Emma.
Yeah!
I didn't know we were going. Yeah, I guess we're going.
We had no cues.
We're going with that, of course.
What about mine?
Welcome to a new episode of Not Just Any Book Club. We have some guests today to talk about Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
Gang, gang.
One of the episodes where we've all read the same thing. My name is Pierce. This has been my favorite dystopia for a long time, since I read it back in high school a couple of years ago now. Feels like forever ago.
I read it in high school
Pierce is
because
very old.
Pierce recommended it to me. So I read it senior year, did a whole Socratic on it, so this is my second read as well.
This was my second in-depth read. I've skimmed it a couple of times, looked back over it, but this is like I think it's the third time that I've actually like
Damn.
sat
This
down
is my
and
first.
read it cover to cover.
This is JB's first as well.
Dang.
Indeed.
Damn.
Oh. Okay, well, yeah, Brave New World, a dystopia written by Aldous Huxley. It is often juxtaposed with 1984, which we'll talk about a little bit more, I'm assuming,
I've never
later.
read it.
You've never
Um,
read it?
Okay, you
Nope.
should read 1984. It should come free
Well,
with living in modern society.
Well,
In
I know I
America.
should read it, but like I just never got around to it, and there we go.
Were you one of those kids in high school that just looked up with Spark Notes and passed all those?
No,
exams,
it was we
We
had
had
the
a
same
choice.
class. We had a choice of dystopia. It was, and
or-
I had already
There
read
was, like,
this, so I
there was
read
The Road,
1984.
Brave New World, 1984, Handmaid's Tale.
That
I
was
feel
it.
like there was like another one, but nobody chose it.
Well, this is a deep cut that only Pierce
That
and
might
Emma
have been a
will
different one.
Either way,
I was in the flowing
But
with
yeah,
thread
no,
to
he
that
chose-
YA fiction.
But yeah, Pierce chose 1984, and then Pierce also convinced me to do Brave New World. So that's how that happened.
either way, this book is often juxtaposed with 1984. We'll talk more about why later. In my opinion, it's better than 1984. I enjoy it more as just a reading experience. And it's often lauded for its predictions about the future. It was first published in 1932, and to this day, just like with 1984, people say, "Oh wow, look how much it got right." It says a lot about society.
Yeah. Literally 1984.
Literally 1984. And I think it's eternally important with its juxtaposition to 1984 in that 1984 is one side of an authoritarian coin, and this is the complete other side. So, without further ado, I think we'll talk a little bit about plot. I don't want to do an out-and-out summary because it's actually a quite simple story.
Yeah.
The book's like barely 250 pages, and the story itself is extremely simple.
Story
Basically,
is just an excuse. Just
yeah.
everything to happen.
Basically, we're dropped in this society. We learn a little bit about this Brave New World. We're in New London. We're introduced to a few characters, namely, probably the two most important ones, Lenina Crow and Bernard Marx, who I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot. Lenina Crow, she's been getting into relationships, and she's like almost committing, which we're told is bad in this society. She keeps getting with the same person over and over again. and her friend Fanny keeps telling her, no, just, like, you gotta get with other people. Isn't it so boring to be with the same person all the time? Bernard is infatuated with her, and he asks her to go on a date/vacation to see the savages in the essentially mainland America. So they fly over there, and that is where they meet the third main/important character, John the Savage, who is the son of two people from New London, New London.
Which yes, but we
Yeah.
only find out one of them
we start
later.
yes.
Mhm.
But he's from by birth. He's from this other place, but he's grown up entirely in this new world, or in the Americas. And so he's grown up around the savages, as they're called, who again we'll talk about it later. And he loves Shakespeare and spirituality, and so Bernard, looking for a claim to fame, brings him back. Also, he thinks he knows who the father is. He brings him back to New London, and he shows him off. In fact, the very first thing that he does, I believe, is he brings him back and is like, "Isn't this guy your son? Don't you know?
Whoa!
Do you know this guy?"
Oh.
Hey, get a load! Get a load
Yeah.
of this guy.
My father.
uh, and anyway, the rest of the story essentially is John's reaction to this brave new world and the world's reaction to him. And it's the effects on him, the effects he has on the people around him. And I'm sure we'll talk about the ending. I don't want to open with that, but it doesn't end well, really, for anyone involved. So
Which is
we'll
weirdly up to like interpretation for some of them too,
yeah, exactly.
depending.
Depending on the person.
Hmm. We can get into that.
Yeah, we'll
I guess
get into that
for
later.
some of them it does technically end pretty well. But
It definitely ends better.
yeah. Well, for Helmholtz, he gets exactly what he wants. Again, we'll talk about the ending later, I think.
Yeah.
We won't start there. So I kind of have I don't know if it's a totally unique take. I haven't really done any looking around, but I tried to read this a little bit differently this time. So I want to go over that in a bit. I guess I want to hear what other people have to say first, and then I'll talk about what the way that I read it this time.
Say about what? Say that again.
Just anything. Is there any
Okay.
specific scene that you want to talk about? Any specific part of the society? The Bakanovsky process, the ideals, Soma.
So we're just talking about the
Um,
world here.
yeah,
I
that's
guess.
basically
Yeah.
the whole
There's
thing,
the
right?
whole book. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that this book is a very huge condemnation of hedonism. You know, enjoying
Mhm.
stuff all the time, and boredom is a crime, all that stuff. So, as you can tell, like life is not very fulfilling. John the Savage, who has experienced art, which is a foreign concept in this world. He experiences like some of the lowliest art. Soma is basically just a sedative. I think it depends on the amount of doses you take of Soma. It's basically just keeping people compliant. They don't really care about the truth, rather than because they kind of know they're being duped, but it doesn't really matter because they've gotten curiosity kind of beaten out of them from birth. They're just genetically modified just to be complacent and not want anything more and just wanting what's best for them. And I think they die by the age of 60 or 30, some ridiculously low number. It's basically just to keep this world pristine as possible.
I believe it was 60. They have processes to keep people from aging after they
Aging, yes,
turn like
physically.
20, and then but the processes basically your body breaks down like right around 60
Yeah.
basically every time. Whatever they do to keep people young.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they even talk about or at least like in the end of the book, Mustafa like talks about how old humans back then used to get, and old age was like the way to die. Like that's how people died. It was terrible and it was the worst way of death. And that's
Yeah.
like in chapter 17. Like he talks to John about that way later,
Mhm.
about that form of dying.
Yeah.
So I guess obviously the book's anti-hedonism. We can point kind of to
Can I say that like I don't really like I don't necessarily like see the anti-hedonism part of it if I'm being 100% honest.
Oh.
how do you mean?
Like so I mean like obviously like yeah they're using like so someone's supposed to be like the wonder drug like there's no hangover, you don't feel bad after you take it, and it
Mhm.
lets you forget whatever stressful experience that you had, and like it is a sedative, but like it seems like it's meant more so as a sedative than it is like necessarily like a drug that they take like just for enjoyment. Even though they do that, they do that 100%. But I feel like it instead of like being like it doesn't seem anti-hedonism because it's all like it's forms of control, I guess. Like at the end of the day, and it's like I don't think that the people themselves could be like blamed for their hedonistic ways or the society even because it's necessarily just like a form of control. Like the higher ups would, I feel like they would say that the way that they operate is more so to eliminate like just any kind of like like negative thoughts. Like they want you to be
Mhm.
distracted, they want you to consume, they want you to buy things, they want you to act like this certain way, and if you see something that goes against like how the society wants you to think, they want or that stresses you out in any kind of way or like challenges anything that like to be based upon, they they're soma. Yeah.
Well, I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
it's more so the book, like taking the book afterwards is more like anti-hedonism in the sense of like, well, when you read this and you see this like society that is constantly seeking like that pleasure and self-indulgence because it's just second nature, like that's just what you're supposed to do. I think in that way the book's saying like, see how this society is doing all that? You don't have to do all of that. Or that's not necessarily good and like seen
Yeah.
as like what should be second nature. So it's not necessarily
And
that the book is anti-hedonism, it's just what you can get that reflects the society. Like what should you compare it to what
Hmm.
you should be living, I guess, if that makes sense.
well, and I don't think it being a form of control necessarily means that the book can't also be anti-hedonism, and I would point directly to this is kind of a thing that a lot of people have analyzed to death, that the people in the society, there's kind of a chicken and the egg situation here where the people in the society asked for it because of painful events that they kind of touch on in that final sequence between Mustafa Mond and John the Savage. That there were painful events historically, and people asked for soma and feelies and so on to block out all of the pain. I again, I talked about, and has talked about in general, the fact that this is kind of the anti 1984, because in 1984 there's a intense focus on the authoritarianism that is forced upon people, that Big Brother is always watching, and you're going to be tortured if you don't follow. But in this world, you kind of get what you asked for, what will keep you docile, because you want it still, right? You have the lower classes who panic when they don't get their soma. Even in the punishments, instead of in 1984 where Winston is found out and he's tortured, in this book, um, in this book, sorry for the 90-year-old book spoilers. Um, in this book, instead, they're sent to an island where they can be intellectual and they can read and write and feel pain outside of society where they're no longer a danger. So it's a gift to them as much as it is a punishment. I guess my point is that I don't think you can really completely separate from them being tools of control from hedonism, from people wanting to do those things, because the reason that they are able to control them with it is because they do want those things. And I also think that you're kind of starting to touch on something that I wanted to talk about later, which is that it's not necessarily all bad. Huxley
Yeah, no.
doesn't think all these things are completely negative. He thinks that the way that they are being used is completely negative.
Well,
I
like,
know.
I mean,
Mhm.
I like the impression that I got from the book was that it was more so like a story, like ultimately like I kind of like whenever I read it, I kind of focused more on the society aspect of it than I really did like the characters, if I'm being 100% honest. Um, but the way that like the society and like and stuff and John like are presented to me at least is that like it's more so like you have like stability at the sacrifice of individuality versus like individuality at the whim of chaos, kind of. Like, not to say that either one is necessarily like bad, like they're just different sides of like the same coin essentially. I don't know, was that stupid?
No, I see what you're saying, but I think I take the opposite view of it, that Huxley is specifically in these instances both what John the Savage is and what he believes, and also the society in general. I think he's saying that there's intense negative aspects of the way that both of them are, both of these ideologies, the way that both of them are going about these things. And I don't think he necessarily believes that Huxley necessarily believes that all both of these sides are bad outright. Just that the instances that he's portraying and the way that these world events have led up to these ideologies and these instances of them, those are bad, and he's showing like a negative side of all of it. Even though I think we're still kind of meant to be on John's side a little bit, quite a bit. I still think that he's also showing some negatives there as well.
I got Emma, your mic's muted. I don't
Pardon.
have anything to add to that. Yeah, that was a pretty good discussion.
Um,
I do
yeah, I
think that like
was.
take it away, Emma. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I think that John really does take a lot of negative effects from being introduced to this new society that his mom calls like a paradise,
Hmm.
because in the end of the book, it almost seems like he's gotten a little crazy. Um,
A little.
and a little. But it's kind of like, oh, it's this paradise. You can use this drug if you want to. These are the pleasures that you can indulge in, and then he takes all of what the good's supposed to be and you know runs insane with it, and he knows all this information now and he can't do anything about it. It's like he doesn't have any power to shift society, but he's also not allowed to go to the island to just be with other people with
Hmm.
your own individuality. So he's stuck, which I think is what drives him to that madness of knowing all this stuff. You can't talk to anyone about it. You can't do anything about it. And I mean, society's just like, well, look at that guy. Look at that guy over there.
Yeah.
Um, which is kind of circles back to the beginning of that. ostracizing. He ostracizes himself, which Bernard did in the beginning as well. So it's like all these little changes of
Mhm.
the society that you are surrounded with. I guess it's how you decide to perceive it and outwardly show how it affects you.
Yeah.
Justin,
I don't know
what
if
were you
that
gonna
made sense.
what were you gonna
Well,
say
no,
now
it,
that
it
you're
was basically what Emma was saying. I just want to add to that. It's kind of like the opposite of the truth setting you free, because once he learned about it, he's just kind of become an outcast on both sides. Can't really return to back to his normal life because he knows too much, and he's not really accepted or integrated into the society because even though he wants to be human and rejects what a lot of Malpai, is that what
yeah,
that city's called?
Malpai, something like that, something
Yeah.
between
So,
those.
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
It,
he's just kind of an outcast, and he will never fully integrate because I think he kind of upturned the society by the end, and I think he was given the opportunity to integrate at the end by Ford or whoever.
I think the like in
He
the
is
end,
given the opportunity to integrate for
yeah.
sure. Definitely,
Um,
he's given that
I
chance.
think I think his, he was refusing so long to integrate in the way that
Mhm.
they would perceive the right way to do so. And then in the end, I think it just kind of drives him to madness, and to which he does take the drugs and he does start doing all of
The
the
nasty.
nasty
He
things
gets in
that,
an
like,
orgy
cuz
porgy.
yeah, literally. And like when he gets there initially, it's like, oh my god, look at all this immoral stuff. um Lenina is like so promiscuous, and it's like, you have all those things, and in the very end he knows everything, and it was like inevitable that he was
Yeah.
gonna succumb to using all of the quote unquote pleasures of that world.
I think also you can't really talk about John without talking about how both intensely idealistic he is, which
Mm,
also leads to an intense naivete.
mm,
He is uh it's I don't know. It's like he believes so strongly in these things, and it kind of almost leads him to be ostracized in the society itself. He can't really communicate with these people. He's not operating on the same level as them, and I also think his naivety is something that Huxley is criticizing about this type of person, this ideology that he holds, that it's not realistic. Um, really, to have a society that's basically run on that. Not even the savages, quote unquote, were running on his intense moral code that he's plucked from high literature and Shakespeare and all that. Um,
which
I,
can
mhm.
sorry, you were still going.
I was just gonna say, and also just the whole scene with Lenina where she they're trying to express their feelings for one another, and she comes on to him really strongly, and is
Mm,
is basically assaulting him at towards the end of it,
yeah.
and then he physically assaults her back. They're operating on two completely different
Hmm.
levels. They're not even able to. They're trying to communicate the exact same thing. She seemingly, in my opinion, has romantic feelings for him in the
I
same
think,
way that
yeah.
he does for her.
But she
But
doesn't really have a way to communicate that, because that's not.
and he doesn't really
Yeah.
either in plain language. All he has is Shakespeare, which she's not going to be able to
Yeah.
understand. Even
What?
Mm.
some lay people might not even be able to understand.
Yeah. He's basically a nerd that only speaks in Shakespeare quotes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
that
me for real.
the entire I so the re so so I reread it, and then I then listened to the last 2 chapters just to kind of like just hear that dialogue kind of be recited back to me,
Oh,
and it's it's kind of insane because it's like, oh, that's from Hamlet, and like I just like
yeah.
entire conversation with Mustafa Mond. It's a bunch of quotes while he's telling him like, well, you know all of this stuff in the Bible and yada yada yada, and he's just like, you know, whether 'tis nobler of and
Mine to
it's
suffer.
yeah,
Yeah.
which
Huh.
I mean is something that I mean he says that quote. It makes a lot of sense here. Like, is it better to know and suffer or not? Um,
Well, we know how that ended for him.
Yeah.
True. But then what do you think, like, would you rather be unaware in the society like Lenino or, you know, any other lower caste system? Would you rather be just blissfully unaware and just go about your day taking soma and, you know, engaging in these pleasures, or would you rather know everything and not be able to
Uh,
do anything?
well,
Because you at this point you're not like a controller, most likely.
yeah. Well, I mean, if the government is that oppressive, well, they aren't really oppressive. Well, society's just gonna shun you for it. If you like free thought, anything that is not
Yeah.
uh
So society is oppressive. The government is like
permissive of that.
it focuses on conditioning society to be
Mhm.
oppressive. The government itself is actually not that oppressive, but
So
the
so
the
what end would you rather be at then? Blissfully unaware or aware of literally all of it, but still stuck there?
The
none.
yeah, the easy answer. Okay, like the answer that makes me sound smarter than I actually am is like I would totally want to be aware of everything, but we saw what happened with John, so maybe not.
I
But
think like the big question is like, what are you willing to sacrifice for stability?
Hmm.
Like, are you willing to sacrifice everything that makes you a unique person, or even just parts of that too? You know, like
which is like the individuality of it all.
Free thought.
Kind of like, yeah, free thought.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's like it's demonstrated that like the chaos of free thought isn't necessarily good, aka John, but like
Hmm.
yeah,
But then you also have Bernard and
Helmholtz.
Helmholtz.
Bernard's ugly.
We
um
have a
so
number one Bernard hater here, guys.
so speaking of Bernard Marx, I think he is kind of a special case in a way to look at in the
Mhm.
society because from the outset it's very clear that he kind of understands that there's something wrong, that he's
Hmm.
like this society, there's something wrong with it, right? With he doesn't like taking soma that much at the beginning, although he does give in occasionally.
He also
um
doesn't even look like he belongs where he's
yeah, he
supposed
doesn't
to
look
belong.
like he
There's
belongs
trouble with women.
in the cast. He has trouble with women. Um
Don't say short. Don't you dare say it.
He is short.
he is
He's
short.
shorter than all the other alphas.
um
He's
Short,
scrawny.
ugly, stupid, bitch made.
Stop describing me.
but but
All the listeners don't
I
know what he looks like.
I think what's interesting about Bernard is the shift that takes place after he meets John. Um, because while I feel like at the beginning I almost feel in his like we're supposed to kind of be alongside him. Like he's he seems like he knows there's something wrong, and he's trying to think about it and he's trying to be an individual. And then he meets John and he starts getting all this attention, and then it becomes intensely clear that he just felt like an outsider and he wanted attention and he wanted credit for something. And um, but I think it's also, you know, he he wants society to change. I think still even towards the end, but what he wants more is to be special in some way. Um, he seems to want to soak up any attention that he can be given, um, and he would prefer that even over society changing, seemingly, even though he knows that there's something not quite right. In that way, he's kind of deplorable in that he
Yeah.
figures it out, but he's also, I don't know. I still can't help but feel bad. I think like that's
Yeah.
kind of the whole thing is I just feel immense pity for these people
Yeah.
who can't help themselves, either because they are conditioned not to, or because they have some kind of thing inside them, their personality. In the case of Bernard, or Lenina with the conditioning. In the case of conditioning,
Even
um,
Helmholtz feels pity for Bernard.
yeah.
Like I
Well,
think it's in
I
what,
feel
like the third chapter, he's like, I feel ashamed of him.
yeah. I feel pity even for John. Like
Oh yeah.
Oh, well,
people
everyone feels
they
pity for
can't
John.
help themselves.
He could have had a lot of different like circumstances play out there.
Yeah.
I feel like John, out of all of them, is definitely the one where like his life could have gone in so many different ways. Whereas like a lot of the others, they didn't really have a choice how their life started and how they were
Hmm.
conditioned and, growing up in their society that they were brought in. It was all constructed.
Yeah.
Whereas with John, he was there for 20 years and became his own person and,
Right.
comes into this other place and disrupts a lot of things, which also disrupt a lot of things within himself.
Yeah. With John, he has nothing and nowhere by the end of the book, and
Hmm.
that is
He
probably
he has God.
the most depressing thing. Not even that.
Not even that. He literally prays overnight. And then the next morning, he finally felt worthy enough to go to this lighthouse. And it's like, bro,
So
like that's a lot to like pray and then feel worthy enough to just go be alone.
huh.
Kind of like, wow, to end up
Yeah.
where you end up, especially when he asked Mustafa Mon to go to the island, and he was like, nah, I like this experimenting stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
he definitely doesn't say it like that, but um,
Yeah.
It's like almost
Um.
like if John had gone to the island too, maybe like he would have been better off for it.
I think he would have.
Yeah,
At
he
least he would have been
absolutely would
around.
have been better off
Yeah,
for it.
he would have been around other people that are also free thinking. Which, and another thing, do you think, like with Bernard, learning what he learns
Hmm.
and you know with the whole rebellion, like, do I
Yeah.
support it, do I not, and all that stuff. Do you think he wins or loses in this? Because I
He
I
he
have an opinion,
he loses.
but
Internally, it's like, so basically he kind of goes to this kind of fake arc where he kind of ends in the same place. Internally, he ends up in the same place where he started. He doesn't really change. He gets punished for really staying the same, but kind of worse. Um, he's I wanted to say this before, but he kind of accepts the society that oppresses him, probably worse than other people. Um, so it's kind of just a kind of this backhanded insult for him just to be, um, one, to advance as a society that he can never fully achieve and then get sent off. And I think, I we might go a little bit off topic here, but like I think Bernard Marx and Hamilton Watson, they're kind of like foils to each other, even though they're kind of like friends.
like, yeah,
Bernard, he wants to advance up the society, but he cannot. And Hemelt, he's the ace. He had all the scribades love him. He's good at
cream of the
everything.
crop.
Yeah, and Hemmelt's, he wants out. He kind of just wants to be. He practices art secretly, And at the end, they both are given the same fate, and I think this is where their contrast really come to fruition. Bernard
Mhm.
laments at the fact that he's being relocated outside of the society, while Helmholtz takes it in pride. He's like, "Damn, I get to be an artist now."
Here, what
So,
is it though? Because
To be a true
when I
artist.
was listening back on it,
Hmm.
he like
He like
it's
grovels at the
yeah, it
feet of Mustafa Mond.
yeah.
He like wants he begs to stay.
Hmm.
mhm. And I think like yeah, he begs and grovels, but then what's that at the bottom?
Yeah, the entire
Um,
penultimate chapter with the basically John the philosophizing about free will, and I think it was Mustafa Mons, or was it the director?
Mustafa
Yeah.
Mond.
Okay, Mustafa Mons. They're basically talking to each other, and I guess that's where the philosophy. The entire chapter, pretty cool. Especially at the end where he goes, "I want pain, I want poetry, I want art." It really
oh
speaks
yeah.
true to the heart where he wants to be human. And I think that's the most dialogue-heavy chapter of the entire book by far, and it comes off as like this moment where you want to clap up until the end. All
So
right.
I finally found what I was looking for.
Okay.
So essentially, before Bernard and Helmholtz are, off and away, um, John remarks that Bernard's expression was of determined resignation.
Oh.
Um, and then he apologizes for what happens the day before, um, which is like, uh, for me, like the whole win loss, I don't think it's either because on one hand, you win in the fact that you don't have to be stuck in this society anymore that you don't feel a part of. And that you
Mhm.
feel like ostracized from. But then on the other hand, you kind of lose because now you're away from the society where it's all you've known and you wanted to, get better there. And then the fall of it all.
That
So I
sounds like an
think,
absolute win to me,
I
personally.
mean, personally, it would be a win to like be shipped off, which it is for Helmholtz. But for Bernard, I don't think it's either because you could
Right.
weigh it in either way for him.
But I think from our perspective, we're supposed to see that this is a flaw in Bernard. This is not
Yeah.
like I don't think I feel like we're moralizing a bit too much. It's not really. It's not that it's a win or a loss from any one perspective. I think we're supposed to see it as an absolute win that Bernard can't see for some reason.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true.
He
It's a
can't
win.
understand that it's a win.
And John understands that for sure because he's like,
Yeah.
I wish I want that. And Bernard's like, well, he's almost humbled by like being sent there. Like that's your fate, and you just have to take it.
Yeah.
Mm-mm-mm.
Um I guess I'm going to turn us to something else.
Oh.
I'm gonna ask you guys a question. I think it's pretty clear, both in the book and what Huxley has written and said about it since, that these aspects of this society are bad. But I want to ask, why are they bad? Why is Soma bad? Why are the Feelies
Ooh.
bad? Why is um, the these hedonism, the promiscuous sex, the orgies? Why are they bad morally?
I think we should let the first time readers go first on that.
Oh. Well, it is a condemnation of it. Again, we've said hedonism or hedonism so many times that if you've
Mhm.
taken a shot each time you said it, sorry, viewers or listeners. But it is a condemnation of that, and because I think Aldous Huxley kind of just views it as unnatural, kind of inhumane, just to basically stymie and stifle any kind of progress with just like a drug that satiates the mind and basically just does prevents any desire to advance in society or humankind or technology or art because you stagnate. you don't want to move up in the world, and you don't want to create culture. It's just there in perpetuity. So basically, Soma is bad because it kind of makes you complacent with society.
JB.
Oh, honestly, I don't. I kind of say the same thing. Like, I'd say that like in a way, robbing yourself of like the negative things, like the things that would challenge the way that you think, is like that in itself is bad because that's how like you grow through adversity. And it doesn't allow, and they don't want the individual to grow. Like they want the individual to be just a cog in the machine that is the society. It, like I'd say that it's bad because it's like there's no because like there's no like thoughts of like I'm dissatisfied with this or whatever. There's no thoughts to challenge them either because it's like I'm dissatisfied. Soma.
Yeah, your bread and circuses, they're being provided.
Your choices are taken away
It,
in
uh,
this.
can,
It's like technically you have the choice to take Soma and you have the choice to participate in, you know, all
wait,
these things. But sorry, go
I
on.
did. Sorry, is it like bad if I could go and like go into?
Yeah,
No, you
keep
can keep
going.
going.
Okay,
No,
keep going.
keep going.
But like, so I was like as far as like the sexual promiscuity goes too. Like it's not necessarily that like they just want people fucking just because they want people fucking. Like
Okay.
it's more
It's a
like
Monetization?
family-friendly podcast.
Oh, I didn't warn them about that. I
It's
didn't
fine.
know.
banging instead of banging.
It's fine.
It's been so long since I've been on.
I dude, she told me this is blame her.
I was like, no, it should be fine. It's okay.
Anyways,
Okay. Bang
bleep
into
that out.
bang. Bang into bang.
Like it's more so that like they use their sexual promiscuity as like a tool to eliminate shame. And like not to say like shame isn't necessarily like a bad thing. Like it's something special,
Human.
you
It's
know?
human. Yeah, it's human.
Yeah, it's like you only show the people that you truly feel comfortable with your shame, but nobody has any shame anymore because they're all doing the do.
Okay.
I think
So you think being
like
family friendly?
doing the
Try.
do. Birds and the bees and it around it about. um,
Okay.
but I
Personally, family
think
unfriendly.
I think like all of that it takes away the individual's choice. It's now a societal like decision because
Yeah.
while you can choose not to do those things, then you end up like someone like Bernard who kind of ostracizes like besides just his looks and his demeanor and how he is, he also chooses not to do those things. So it's like, people are like, "Really? You want to go for Bernard like to Lenina?" And it's like, I mean, yeah, but it's one of those things of like if you don't do it, again like JB said, there's shame. So it's bad because it restricts all decision like all your choice making as like an individual. Because you have a world like today where drugs are bad and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
but
They
like
are.
but it's different in the sense of like, okay, well, some drugs people argue that are like not that bad for you. Like people are like, oh, you could do cannabis and it'll help soothe your nerves, or like cannabis oil to soothe your joints, and
Okay.
it's like
Yeah.
that's not bad. But with soma, it's like, oh, this is amazing. You bring it into a society like today, and they're like, this is a bad drug, and you
Okay.
can't do that.
I,
You know. So like
I was.
in the grand scheme of it, it is just like it's
Well,
bad because no one knows that it is, and I think
Okay.
that's harmful for society
I
to
mean, like I
kind of
think
went
that
in the circle.
you could kind of
Yeah.
draw like a similarity between like soma and things that like we have today. Like I mean,
Yeah.
like alcohol, uh, like TV, stuff like that, like things
Oh.
that are like
Or
kind of meant to distract us.
podcasts too.
Podcasts, yeah,
Too much knowledge learning in a podcast. Can't have
specifically
that.
ones with dudes named Justin and Pierce.
Can't have that in our new society. Um, I feel like all those things are bad because it restricts society to have individuality.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I said before that I tried to read it with a specific mindset, trying to figure out, and it was to try and figure out why exactly Huxley is saying these things are bad. Because there's got to be a unity there, right? There's something
Mhm.
unifying all of these disparate things that Huxley doesn't like for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Um, what's interesting is, I guess I'll start with this. What's interesting, I think this is pretty interesting that people all over the political spectrum love this book. Love this book.
Mhm.
Conservatives love it. They love it
For a
because
different reason.
they see the hedonism, they see the drugs, the promiscuous sex, they see all this, and they say, get rid of all of it.
hmm
But the reason that I decided to read this, trying to keep in mind why Huxley would think these things are bad, is because I know that he wrote another book called Island, which is utopian, and it flips a lot of these things on their head. They still do a lot of these things, but the way that they go about them is supposedly positive, right? So we know that Huxley is not saying, hey, you stop having sex, no drugs. Especially because he wrote a book called The Doors of Perception, where he talked about like dropping acid or whatever. Um, so
Ooh, let's
we
go
we know
Huxley.
we know that Huxley is not like anti-drug, anti-sex. So I read it with that in mind. I think there's a lot of things that we said that was right. The loss of individualism,
hmm
Soma dulls
Yeah,
pain, and pain builds character. Um,
right.
a lot
But
of
then
those
also,
things.
sorry.
But I think what is at the crux of all of it, that Huxley is trying to pull us in all from all these disparate things in the direction of, is doing things mindfully. Um, I think I would agree with conservatives when they say the words, uh, when they say Brave New World is coming true. When they're like, oh, it's some of these predictions are right. I would agree that with that. I would disagree with, oh, get rid of all of it. I think that the thing is, the reason why we feel like Brave New World is coming true is because I feel like people are doing things mindlessly now. They're doing things without really thinking about them. Um, we rob ourselves of rewarding experiences, doing things with intelligently, uh, pursuing pleasure. Um, and in Brave New World, the society's goal is to dull or
Mhm.
simplify all of these different enriching experiences to the point that they only fulfill in terms of pleasure. So the feelies are talkies, but dulled down to the point that all they do, there's nothing mindful about them. There's no analysis needed. They happen and they're cool, and there's explosions and kissing, and it's like you're there and you feel it, man.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, the children at the beginning of the book who are playing with each other have a lack of understanding of
Mhm.
that act. They can't understand it. They don't know how important it is. We think today in our society, they can't understand it. Um, they yeah, I wrote this down on page 38. They talk about Lenina possibly needing a pregnancy substitute, right? We talk about the
Mm.
meaningfulness of having children and raising children, and while that's not for everyone, that's certainly something that brings meaning to a lot of people. And instead of actually going through that, through pregnancy and then having a child, they have these some kind of a medical process that essentially gives you that feeling without actually doing it.
They have a
Um,
19-year-old in like the beginning of the book
mhm.
that does it. Like she talks to Lenina, and she's like, "But you're 19."
Yeah.
It's like, this is what the doctor said would work best for me.
The quote that I have from when Bernard first goes to an orgy porgy, it's from page 85. "Wasn't it wonderful?" said Fifi Bradlaugh. "Wasn't it simply wonderful?" She looked at Bernard with an expression of rapture, but of rapture in which there was no trace of agitation or excitement. For to be excited is still to be unsatisfied. When Linda returns to the society, she takes a bunch of soma, and it gives her eternity. Right? She has an eternity of thoughtlessness, of mindlessness, of not feeling pain or really anything outside of herself that could, build her up or affect her in some way. She just goes into a soma coma, essentially. Just all of these things, we're not, the people in the society are not doing them with any thought in mind of building up something, being fulfilling, um, building your character in any way. There's none of that. It's just doing. It's consuming. It's feeling the pleasure from it, and that's it. And that, again, that's where the promiscuity comes in. There's no building there. It's just, you just have sex and then it's over.
Yeah, like how the gammas at the beginning, they talk about how like their biggest consumption thing, or thing that they consume, is travel.
Right.
But they don't even like where they're going. They just enjoy traveling.
Yep. And then I guess just to finish off, I have a chart of differences between Island, his utopia, and Brave New World. On Island, they use drug use for enlightenment and social bonding, while in Brave New World, it's used for pacification and self-medication. On the island, they have group living so that children are not just completely exposed to their parents' neuroses, and like we talk about how everyone is messed up by their parents somewhat. They have group living to try and avoid some of that. And in Brave New World, they have group living to eliminate the individual. Few other
We're
things.
not lying with
They have
Which comes
freely
clips.
available contraception on the island to enable reproductive choice. And in Brave New World, contraception is mandatory.
I'm a fan of the island. Gotta say it.
Yeah,
Yep.
Woot
this
woot
is a
island.
utopia.
The assisted reproduction on the island is low-tech artificial insemination, so people get pregnant when they want to, on their terms, and they try and make the child that they want. And then in Brave New World, it's assisted reproduction, test tube babies to just get rid of the whole parenthood thing completely. So
Because
yeah,
that's scandalous. That's grotesque in this. Like, even in the first chapter, the director's taking them through all of this stuff, and he's like, and then who is it? It's either Foster or Mon comes by, and he mentions kind of old world stuff, and he's like, and can you believe that people used to do this on their own together? And the the description of these boys' faces is of like, oh my god, like how could they? That's terrible. And you just,
a mother.
what's a mom? And you just like, you're reading that back, and on the second reread, I think it's still just as hilarious to read of like, these students, are just so blissfully unaware of how society like should not should be, but at least was, and how what should be deemed as normal. And then they're like, "Oh, and don't forget, kids doing all this stuff was highly frowned upon, actually illegal." They're like, "What in the world? What do you mean illegal?" And because the first chapter is essentially like, you are also the student
Mm-hmm.
in this. Like, you're learning with them, and it's like if you were there looking around at these students, are you going to be having the same
Thought process,
experience,
yeah.
Well, like
Yeah.
if you think about it, we kind of do still though. Like I mean, like if you talk about how people lived like even like 50 years ago, all the asbestos in their bodies.
How do you
True,
mean?
like all like the normalized stuff back then,
No.
that's
Yeah,
kind of more like
and like now we look at
taboo
it.
now.
Yeah, and like now we'd look at it and be like, what the? Why were they? Why would they even think that?
Not washing your hands. Little things.
But yeah, I guess my general point, just to close that, is just the reason why I think Huxley thinks all these things are bad is because, or the way that they're done is morally wrong, is because it it takes away kind of the process of human enlightenment in all the facets of life. To strip everything down to just the pleasure that we get from things it's a gross misrepresentation of what makes life good.
It honestly takes the pleasure out of it when it's only meant for pleasure and no other experience except feel good. And
Mhm.
with the quote that you had from chapter, what was it? Was it or page like
The
38
page
or
80,
something?
the
80.
was it the pregnancy substitute or was it the one about the orgy?
Orgy porgy.
Okay, yeah, it was page 85.
Yeah, 85. With that, like there can't be any excitement because if there was, then there'd also be a hint of unsatisfaction, because to get excited about something means that you are unsatisfacted like
Mm.
beforehand, and that if you're going to get excited again, then that means you're going to get like you know sad about something, or you're going to like
Yeah.
feel without.
Mhm.
But it's like these people constantly have the
Mhm.
pleasure stuff. And so it's like you can't really get excited about like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna take soma. It's like, hey, I'm gonna go take some soma. So
Yeah.
all of that livelihood that people have now, that's taken away. Like
Mhm.
the whole individual thing and everything, yeah, but even emotionally, like you're not even free to have your own
Mm.
emotions at this point. Like, yeah, you talk how you talk and you have conversations that differ from everybody else's, but that doesn't mean like, you get to experience things the way we think humans are supposed to experience things.
All right. I think I have a few more notes. I'm just gonna run
Rapid
through them
fire.
real quick,
Rapid
rapid
fire.
fire.
Oh, is
Don't say
this
Um,
to
anything.
end
Clear the
soon?
floor. You clear the
I,
floor. No one's allowed to say anything except for Pierce.
well, no, we can
Oh,
still
okay.
keep talking. I just wanna get through my notes and then we can um and then that way I have everything out and then we can wrap up
Mhm.
when it's natural to do so. Um,
Slay.
the upper classes don't even notice the lower classes typically. We get
Ooh.
very few mentions of them. One of the main mentions where we actually get an extended view of them is when John points them out. John has to point them
Ah.
out. In my edition, it was page 164. John points them out, and that's the first real extended view of we get of them. That's like in person, like they're there. It's not just some concept
Well,
being talked about with the different how epsilons are supposed to be according to whoever was talking about them at the time. Are you gonna say something, JB?
you got it. You got it.
Okay.
I mean, there was that one time where the epsilon like sees the sun, um
Mm.
and it's towards the beginning, like when they go to the roof to get to the helicopter.
Yes.
And he's like, he keeps saying roof, roof, because like, you get to the roof, you see the sun, he almost freezes, like as if he's forgotten what he's actually meant to do. And then, you
Mhm.
just have this voice in the background saying like, go down, hurry, go down, like repeatedly until he actually goes down,
Hmm.
which is like another big like epsilon moment, I think, at the very beginning of the book too, to show that like this is the lowest of the low, and this is extremely abnormal, and he's only and like still he's only saying one word and then goes back to his task, which is like the stark difference of how, well, these people just went up the elevator and then they got on the helicopter and they're like away.
You know, reading this while I was because I've been reading Red Rising, which I have a smile because she knows, but like Red Rising, it kind of has like it functions on a similar sort of societal structure, not necessarily as far as like the hedonism goes, even though that is kind of present. But like reading these like how people are sectioned into epsilons, like in Red Rising, people are sectioned into colors, and like kind of comparing those two was pretty interesting. I gotta say.
Like the whole caste system of it all.
I did read some because there was one point a while ago where I was trying to look into what exactly Brave New World has influenced, and Red Rising is mentioned many times.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then I also had a note about the end, which was that the world even takes the meaning out of self punishment. That
Oh my
John
gosh.
John
Yeah.
tries to cast himself aside, um, leave society, and the world follows him. It keeps him from even punishing himself through solitude, and they just
He
keep
can't.
coming back until
Yeah.
he sees that the only way out is to die.
He can't even like self-harm without having to be a spectacle.
Right.
Like, he whips himself and then people come and gather around. They're like, "Hey, show the whip." And it's like a chorus being like, "Do it, do the whip, do the whipping," and all this stuff. And then, that incites an orgy porgy, and like there's like we're fighting, and the untimely everything that happens at the end there.
Yeah, and they're
Um,
repeating everything he does, and they have no clue like what it means.
mhm. They're doing it because, which is, why I think John is the ultimate like loss of the book. Of like, if you were to go, like, who's got it best and who's got it the worst? I mean, John definitely has like one of the worst straws out of the bunch. Um, and then
Yeah.
like, and
He,
then,
he
sorry, yeah, continue.
he doesn't belong in the society that he was born into, and he doesn't belong in this society either.
And he wasn't even
Um,
allowed to go and to the
yeah.
island to possibly try a new one.
And at least in his old society, he was ignored and he was ostracized a bit, but it felt like he was ignored a lot of the time. And in
Mm-hmm.
this one, they follow him around. It's like a
Because he's like a
it's an
spectacle.
experiment,
He's
right?
Yeah, he's like, oh,
Like
this new unique thing.
unrelenting solitude, and like overwhelming like whatever the opposite of solitude is.
Immersing yourself with like society and people and things. I mean,
I did I did find the book's relationship with women very interesting. I do have to say, because you get like a lot of like different kind of like takes on it, I guess. Like I mean, like so you have like Bernard at the beginning when he's talking about Lina or however we're saying her name today.
Lenina.
Lenina.
Yeah, that one. But like you like so at the beginning of the book, there's Bernard and he's talking about her like if she wants to be a piece of meat, then she can be a piece of meat. He said something along those lines.
Oh yeah, something
I
like
don't have a
kind of gross.
yeah like it's exactly because he's like he's disgusted with like her behavior. Or he
It's
doesn't
like
want
if
her to
she, if
do
yeah, sorry.
yeah
If she wants
and
to be a whore, then let her be a whore.
yeah and then you see John's mom who is kind of like she's essentially doing like what she's is normal in her society, but to John he openly ridicules like he ridicules her behavior in other people, but not her.
Oh, like in his mom.
Yeah, because like so he's calling Lena like a strumpet and everything after their whole altercation, and but like with his mom too, his mom was open. His mom did it in front of him, like and so you see like I find like the difference that he has like between how he like he doesn't even really acknowledge it in his mother, but he with Lena, it's like he's gonna whip her.
I mean, he does kind of acknowledge it, like in the last chapter with his mom, because his Linda has essentially, she died, um, of soma coma, and so, oh gosh, I'm trying to find it, but he talks about her like to himself, and it's like to him, he's almost sad that his mom's gone, but it's like she did that to herself as well. Let me try to.
It's like the way that like she died is like a way that he could never really understand because he wasn't like versus like how he is like wait no it's kind of the same actually like if you think about it like the way that like his mother was kind of forced into society that she didn't belong in, and then eventually when she finally got the option to, she killed herself because like, essentially that's what happened. Like they call it's like Sumikoma or whatever. Like that's what she did, and she knew she was doing it. Like or they all knew that's what she was doing. But like I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm sorry.
It's all
No,
good.
you're good.
It's all good. Um, I was just gonna ask if anyone has any final thoughts. I know it's late for Justin, because of when we're recording this. Um, if you guys have any, we go around final thoughts. Anything that you want to add, and then we'll go ahead and end it off so Justin can make sure he gets to work in the morning.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
hate Bernard. That's all.
that's
Yeah.
that's where you want to leave it. You hate Bernard.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think Bernard
Uh,
is like reflects a lot of like people now, of like the insecurity of it all, and it's like the indecisiveness, and he puts
mhm.
himself in a corner half the time of like, well, I'm not going to participate in this, and then that makes people point him out, and that makes him more like, I mean, even in the beginning, you got Helmholtz being like, if only he would be more confident, like just hold yourself as an alpha because that's what you are. Well, he doesn't say that
Okay.
outwardly, but like it's in his
Yeah.
thoughts. He's ashamed
You
of them.
paraphrase it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing, but it's like,
Okay.
you're an alpha. Why aren't you making yourself like seem like one? Because
Okay.
Helmholtz is
So it's but yeah.
the perfect, and he doesn't say
Yeah.
that, and it's not exactly what he thinks. But like, if I'm to paraphrase, I'm ashamed of you because you're not even like being who you're supposed to be right now.
Secondhand embarrassment,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
Um.
I wonder if this is where the term alpha male came from.
y-
Now that you mentioned it.
If
I think
that's
it.
how
I
it
think it.
stemmed,
I think it came from broader myths about uh,
yeah.
alpha
Okay.
And like
animals,
It
alpha
came
wolves.
from
male animals.
Okay.
misconceptions about
All
wolves.
right.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No,
um,
that's actually the alpha wolf. Okay. Never
I
mind.
think like, oh my goodness. Yeah, Bernard is just a really big reflection of the flaws of a
Huh.
person now. Like in our world of, okay, all this indecisiveness, you're super
Said that.
insecure, you can't like do all those things. And JB, I'm not saying you see yourself in him, but I'm saying like if you see the flaws in his character, it's like, well,
Takes
those
one to know
are
one.
those are flaws you don't, no, but those are flaws you don't like to see in people, so it's almost like an innate thing of like, yeah, you're going to dislike him. But it's almost as if it's because he's too human. He's too like
Okay.
us that he has those feelings.
So,
how dare
so
you
what you're
compare me to
saying?
Bernard?
I'm
I
not comparing you to
Okay.
Bernard.
I think Bernard actually specifically now is probably a good comparison to people, simply because there is a spreading distaste with current society, and I think it's safe to say Bernard also has a severe distaste for his society at the beginning of the novel. But at the same time, a lot of people who claim to have a distaste end up enjoying um, more than
Luxuries.
enjoying the fruits and luxuries of society. They, like I said, like Bernard clearly sees that something is wrong, but he doesn't really pursue change. He pursues being treated like he's daddy's special little boy. You
Oh
know?
yeah.
Little.
You're so special. Look at
Bitch
you
made it.
go.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
You forgot what? You cut off.
Okay, good.
Oh, it was the cursing, wasn't
Oh,
It
okay.
was a curse word.
Ah, he censored himself.
Unfamily friendly.
Okay. One thing I do want to mention is that I don't know if Pierce noticed this, but all the character names are, except for John, they're named after.
What do you mean you don't know if I know? It's like the most obvious thing. The guy's
Okay,
name is
okay, all right.
Bernard Marx.
Marks. Okay. Mustafa Mond,
Yeah.
the war
Well,
something
John the
world.
Savage is actually named after John the Baptist. So
Okay.
you're
There's
wrong.
lots of Johns in the world.
You're
Okay.
Yeah, but it's
Okay.
John the Baptist. That's what he's named after.
John the
He's very
Baptist.
spiritual.
Yeah.
John the Adams, John the Wick, chapter 2.
John the Wick.
There's so many
Okay.
Johns. Okay, you can't just.
Yeah,
I
but
have-
did you have anything you wanted to add about the fact that these people are named after communists, Justin? Or you were just pointing it out?
Oh, they're named after communists. Okay, I thought that was just like
A lot
they're
of
named
them
after-
are. The one of them is a
Economists.
mixture. No, they're not named after economists.
Nope.
Okay.
One of them is named after the first half of his name is Benito, as in Mussolini, and the second half of his name is Hoover, as in Herbert Hoover. And he's not a very present figure in the book, so I don't really know.
No, I remember him.
I don't really know what it means because
But
he's
he's
not.
just in
He's not in
there.
the book. He's just in there.
He's just
named-
there.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people did not like Hoover at the time, and probably still now. So, and Benito, probably not a very favorable comparison. So, whatever it
Feel
means, it's not
bonito.
good.
Speaking,
I have. Oh.
I was just gonna because we mentioned John the Savage being named after John the Baptist. I had kind of one last note that I didn't think I was going to bring up.
Okay.
On page 130, John's talking about his past growing up here, and he talks about him turning to spirituality, him turning to God. His reason for it, and I think this is a massive criticism of John and people who deem themselves very spiritual if they come to it this way, because Linda doesn't have all the answers as far as science, right? She talks about the wonders of science back in New London and all this stuff that she has, and then he asks how it works, and she doesn't know because that's not what she did. Because she doesn't have all the answers, that's why he turns to spirituality and God. And I
Oh.
think that Huxley is saying that is the wrong reason to do.
Oh.
I think he actually, I don't know if he was like super spiritual, but I think he from what I remember, he liked spirituality in one way.
Okay.
Well, it's almost like,
But
feel free to be spiritual, however.
Yeah.
To do it because you just don't have all the information on one thing isn't
Yeah.
really like a.
Just because science doesn't have all the answers doesn't mean it's time to completely turn away from it and just be spiritual.
Yeah. I have one thing to talk about, and it's remained consistent for me since high school. I love how morally gray Mustafa Mond is. I find okay, and I say, look, I did my time writing and my lit
Okay.
essay. This was my jam, and it still is, because this is a man who knows, well, we can like consider everything. And he's helping shape society, making it how it is. And I think it's morally gray because he knows how society could be, and he knows what it's like, and he's living a decent life. However, he's choosing to spare everyone from what could be a trauma, what could be, you know, disastrous for them. He's sparing everybody else with all the knowledge he has because he's like, it's better for them to be blindly happy than to know all of these things and to feel any sense of dread, sadness, hate, anger. Like, it's better to not feel those things than to feel them. And for me, I think it's morally gray because, I mean, he knows each side of the coin. He knows how it could possibly go and how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's choosing, I mean, of course, it's what he like, deems favorable, and all the other controllers, of course. But he knows all the things. He has the books. He opens them
Mm-hmm.
up. He even shows John, and it's like, so, all of this stuff, and we know all these things, but at the end of the day, where does it get you? It's not going to bring you peace of mind and happiness,
I
you
think
know?
yeah, I guess I would say I think it's great that Huxley has provided a full argument for this person, but I feel like a part of the thesis of the book is that he is wrong. I think Huxley would say outright that Mustafa Mond is wrong. And I think it's and I think it's great that we see this full argument that you could technically agree with that there is a moral gray to making sure everyone's happy at the cost of a lot. But I don't know. I feel like the central thesis of the book is that the cost is everything.
Well,
Um,
yeah, the cost
and
is everything.
so I think yeah, when you're listening to him talk, he's so knowledgeable and he knows all this stuff, and
Mm.
he's
So charismatic.
he agrees that all this stuff is great, but where, like you said, where does it get you? And I think the answer is it gets you
Your
everywhere. It gets
life.
you everything. And I think that's what Huxley thinks. I think that's kind of
Mhm.
the central tenet of the book.
I think I agree with that sentiment, and I agree that, like, us, the readers, looking at it, yes, he is wrong, and yes, it gets you everywhere else in life. But in the books society, with that, it's morally gray in the sense of, like, I mean, society blind, like, doesn't know all these things, but it's also he's making this decision of, I'd rather them be happier than to
Hmm.
be worse off with this knowledge, because I think in his mind he's thinking only negative of knowing these things. Like, he
Yeah.
knows knowing these things could be nice, but he's putting, like, he puts it like, what is it, the world's stable now, on page 149, where he's like, the world's stable now because we made this decision to keep that from him, which stable in that society isn't good, but it's it's what it is. And so for him, it's like, we know all this information and we know it's better to keep society as is than to disrupt it and break it into chaos. And you kind of see that in John. Like, now he knows all this stuff. Granted, he's the only one in society who knows it all and can't do anything about it, but he slowly turns to madness because he does know it
Mm-hmm.
all and he's all alone. And it's like, you can't send everybody to the island to be themselves. Then it just becomes everywhere. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things. I think as an experiment, at the end of the day, John did know everything and he ended up dying anyway.
By his own hand.
Yeah. To a
So
state.
in a way, in the book, Mond is right by the very few examples that we get.
Uh,
Outside of the book
uh,
looking no, outside of the book looking in, like me, obviously he's wrong. But
I
if you're someone there and you're like, okay, well, John knew all this stuff and then he killed himself.
No, but he didn't kill himself because he knew everything. He killed himself
Well,
because he
I
couldn't
know that.
escape from society.
Well, I know that,
So
and you know that,
I think I no
but
no no I
people
but
there won't know that.
yeah, but
Exactly.
they also don't know that he knew everything. I think I just
True.
disagree with the tenant that he's either right or wrong.
Mhm.
I don't think that um and yes, there's some gray to it, but the moral gray is that he is choosing people's happiness over the rest of being,
Their
the
sense of
rest of
being,
their
yeah.
individuality. Um, that's the moral gray, And I think
Yeah.
when you make a moral, I think that him choosing the good with the bad doesn't make him. I can't agree that it would make him right in any sense within the book or without.
Mhm.
Well, I think that honestly, like it kind of does. Like I see where Emma's coming from, like with the sense of like, why are you looking? What's going on? Do you see something?
No, I just didn't see that opinion coming from you.
Yeah, no, I mean like I
Sorry.
no, but I can definitely like see like where you're coming from as like as far as like him being morally gray because like I guess it's more like if you're looking at it through his morals, like yes, like he is morally gray. Like he's seen the things that are banned that he's not supposed to be reading, and he's decided to turn away from that because what he believes is that the way that society operates now is better than what it would just operate if these things were public. So I do kind of see that like it's like I don't know, it's just like he's I guess like Chris said, like he's like kind of like willing to sacrifice like
Everything
yeah
in the
yeah
sense of
he's
yeah.
willing to sacrifice everything, including yeah and including anybody else, for the sake of order, like or what he believes or what they determine to be order.
I don't know. I've always been a fan, and I'm happy that it kind of continued over to now that I have enjoyed the character Mustafa Mond. Not that I love him and I believe in
Yeah.
him. It's more so that I appreciate his character and how well-rounded he
Mhm.
is. Of like he makes these judgments,
Yeah. I
that
I I
sorry,
yeah,
yeah.
no, sorry. I want to say like also that's what I was trying to get across is that I do see what you're saying that
Mhm.
he's accepting bad. We would deem it a lot of bad for good,
Right.
and in that way he's gray in universe. I understand where you're coming from
Yeah.
there. Um, sorry, what was the last thing that you said that I was there was something I was jumping into say outside of
Me?
that. Yeah.
Oh, was it me that said it? Or... Yeah, I just enjoy the character. He's
Oh, yes.
well-rounded.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I was trying to get across
Yeah.
is that I think that part of the reason why Brave New World is so great is because Aldous Huxley is willing to put forward the opposite argument wholeheartedly and completely and without necessarily any judgment. And I think that's what you're seeing.
Right.
Is that he has presented this he's presented it all as bad thus far.
Mhm.
And then he brings in Mustafa Mond, and Mustafa Mond comes forward and he says he lays everything out. And the opposing argument is given completely without being flanderized or mischaracterized in some way. I think that's part of what makes this book so great, and Aldous Huxley such a great figure that he's willing to do that right at the end here of his book.
Oh, for sure. He does it at the very end, so it's like, well,
Mhm.
it's fresh in your mind, and it makes you
Mhm.
think, especially with everything else that happens in the end of the book. Um, so yeah, I agree with you that he's very smart in
Yeah.
including it at the end for
It's
those
kind of like a
reasons.
mini twist ending. It flips it on you. It's like, oh,
Yeah, where
Like,
you're like,
hey,
oh
what
shit,
did
he
you
did
think
a
about the other stuff? Remember,
yeah.
guys, it could be good, maybe, according to this
society.
guy.
Yeah.
Society.
Society.
Um,
Made me gay.
to
It's Pride
to
Month. Woo.
Pride Month. To yeah, because
Happy
we're getting
Pride.
into this late. Happy Pride. To let Justin go to bed so he can get it for work tomorrow. I'm gonna go ahead and end us off. Thank you guys for listening. Or watching. If you're on YouTube, give us a like, rating, subscribe, follow, whatever it is, or whatever platform. We really do appreciate it. If you check on our YouTube, the summer has begun. Justin and I, we swear, are going to try and get into making some extra videos and extra content. There's a couple of video ideas we both have that we
I
want to
I might be on some. Who
try and
knows?
create, perhaps.
Yeah.
I'll make an attempt.
You don't know
Yeah.
who's gonna be on there. It
Yeah,
could be literally
It
anybody.
could be anything or
Your mom.
anybody.
Protagonist
All
or
right.
better.
Justin, oh my god.
You can find us on Twitter or TikTok, as long as it's not banned, at Not Just Any Pod.
Society.
And Society. And I think that's it.
Oh, and join us next week or whatever week
yeah,
for.
join us next month for we're going to be watching The Tree of Life to match up well with John Steinbeck's East of Eden.
I
First
still need
fans
to
of
read that.
Justin. Let's go. Well, it's 700 something. Or 600. It's a lot of pages. So
I
yeah.
might not get around to
you
that.
have, you have time, viewers,
You have
and listeners,
time.
and audiences.
You can blast through it. It's actually extremely good, and
Put
you
it
blast
on
through it extremely
2
quickly.
times speed on audiobook, guys.
I believe that's it, Justin.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to say?
No.
Goodbye, Prometheus.